what a momentous week it is for cinema releases. The so-called Barbenheimer doubleheader, in which the titles of two very different films are whimsically conflated. And before I stick the fork of criticism into the oozingly moist pudding of cinema, I want to emphasise that I do expect people to subscribe to this channel and leave a comment. First on our list has to be Christopher Nolan's new personal historical epic Oppenheimer, about J. Robert Oppenheimer, the physicist who led the wartime American team of scientists in their race to develop the atom bomb.
We're in a race against the Nazis. And I know what it means if the Nazis have a bomb.
We have a 12-month head start.
18.
How could you possibly know that?
We've got one hope. All America's industrial might and scientific innovation connected here. A secret laboratory. Keep everyone there until it's done.
Let's go recruit some scientists.
Build a town, build it fast. If we don't let scientists bring their families, we'll never get the best.
Why would we go to the middle of nowhere for who knows how long?
Why? Why? How about because this is the most important thing to ever happen in the history of the world?
You're the great improviser, but this you can't do in your head.
Are we saying there's a chance that when we push that button, we destroy the world?
Chances are near zero.
Near zero.
What do you want from theory alone?
Zero would be nice.
The wartime Soviet intelligence services, the NKVD, had a code name for the Manhattan Project, America's plan to build an atom bomb, Enormous. Nolan's new film about it is absolutely enormous, maybe his most enormous film so far. A gigantic post-detonation study, a PTSD narrative procedure filling his giant screen with 1 million agonised fragments, the shattered dreams and memories of the project's haunted, complex driving force, J. Robert Oppenheimer, a brilliant physicist with the temperament of an artist who gifted humanity the means of its own destruction. And of course, the main event is that terrifying first demonstration, the Trinity nuclear test in the New Mexico desert, in the presence of which Oppenheimer is said to have silently pondered, and later made world famous on TV, Vishnu's line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." This is the Big Bang, and no one could have made it bigger or more overwhelming than Christopher Nolan, and without what's more simply turning it into an action stunt. Although I have to say that this movie, for all its brilliant audacity and ambition, never quite solves the problem of its own obtuseness, filling the drama at such length with the torment of genius functionary Oppenheimer at the expense of showing the Japanese experience and the people of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Nolan moves back and forth in time, either side of the historic 1945 firebreak, giving us Oppenheimer's beginnings as a young scientist, lonely and unhappy, electrified by the new developments in quantum mechanics. He was the young leftist who never became a Communist Party member, but whose anti-fascism galvanized his desire to develop the bomb before the Nazis could, directing the work of hundreds of scientists. And then later, in the 1950s, he's the disillusioned, compromised administrator, hounded by the McCarthyites for his communist connections, nauseated by his own pointless celebrity, by his failure to establish post-war international atomic control, and by a single denied thought. The Nazis surrendered long before there was any suggestion they had the weapon, and bombing the defeated Japanese at Hiroshima and Nagasaki was merely to cow the Russians with a ruthless demonstration of America's new nuclear mastery. Cillian Murphy is an eerily close lookalike for Oppenheimer himself, with his eccentric hat and pipe, and he is very good at his sense of solitude and emotional imprisonment, giving us the Oppenheimer million-yard stare, his eyeballs set staringly wide in a gaunt skull, seeing and foreseeing things he cannot process. Matt Damon is the boorish General Richard Groves, who is Oppenheimer's exasperated military minder. Kenneth Branagh is his genial scientific hero and mentor Niels Bohr. Robert Downey Jr. is the duplicitous Atomic Energy Commission Lewis Strauss. Florence Pugh plays his lover Jean Tatlock, whose heart he broke, and Emily Blunt is his wife Kitty, also very badly treated. Tom Conti plays the sorrowingly detached Albert Einstein, and it has to be said that Nolan, rightly or wrongly, uses non-Jewish actors for Oppenheimer and Einstein, two of the most famous Jews in history, and in fact doesn't quite get to grips with the anti-Semitism that Oppenheimer faced as an assimilated, secular American Jew. There is a horribly gripping scene showing Oppenheimer's formative experiences as an unhappy graduate student in England at Christ's College, Cambridge. He suffered from what amounted to a psychotic breakdown and left a poisoned apple on the desk of his testy supervisor Richard Blackett, played by James Darcy, which Blackett fortunately didn't notice and didn't eat. Nolan coolly invites us to see this as a parable for the lost Edenic innocence of pre-war science, with Oppenheimer as a serpent with Adam's foolish innocence. And of course there is the creeping biographical irony, how terribly close Oppenheimer came to, well, killing someone. The purest payload of fear is delivered in a scene which Nolan handles with great gusto. After the successful detonation of the Hiroshima bomb, Murphy shows us an Oppenheimer in shock, but realizing he has to now address an audience of cheering colleagues and subordinates, knowing that it is his duty now as a leader to congratulate them and be upbeat, stammering out some fatuous remark about how the Japanese, quote, didn't like it, and realizing how callous that is and beginning to hallucinate the horror. Of course, Oppenheimer did not witness the actual use of his weapon. He never saw anything becoming death, the destroyer of worlds, and Nolan takes the decision now to look away from it too, to stay in the United States, to stay with Oppenheimer himself in all his sudden tragic irrelevance. Perhaps the film's most important moment is the one that addresses its own flaw, the legendary post-war encounter in the White House Oval Office between Oppenheimer and President Harry S. Truman, played by Gary Oldman here. He was the man who took the final executive decision to drop the bomb. Nolan and Murphy show how Oppenheimer shrinks and cringes into the couch in front of the president, like a scared little boy, apparently wanting something like absolution from Truman, and mumbling that he feels he has blood on his hands. Angry and baffled, Truman tells him curtly that all this is his political responsibility and asks a very pertinent question. Does Oppenheimer think the Japanese care who made the bomb? No, they want to know who dropped it. And it's true. Concentrating on Oppenheimer is simultaneously fascinating and beside the larger historical point. In the end, Nolan shows us how America's governing class couldn't forgive Oppenheimer for making them lords of the universe, couldn't tolerate being in the debt of this liberal intellectual. Oppenheimer is poignantly lost in this kaleidoscopic mass of broken glimpses, the sacrificial hero fetish of the American century. That's it, but before I leave, I should take a moment to record that this is a sad week for me personally, as my great friend and colleague and the man who preceded me as Guardian film critic Derek Malcolm died this week at the age of 91, a brilliant cinephile of enormous wit and wisdom and an international legend of the film festival circuit. Here's a brief clip of Derek talking about what it's like to be a film producer.
You know, when I was a young critic, I always used to think of producers as the villains of the piece. I thought of them as people who had plenty of money and who told the director exactly what to do, ruined his work, probably put the film out wrong, and in fact took all the money and paid the director a very small fee. There's always the thought that there's some gorgon behind a film, and it's usually the executive producer. Then I suddenly began to see a lot of British films and a lot of European films as well as American films, and my view became a little bit different. And towards the end of my career as a critic, I thought exactly the opposite. I thought the producer was probably the unsung hero of the British film industry. Think of what they have to do. First thing they have to do is find some money for a film. That takes about 3 or 4 years sometimes. They then have to, having found the money, perhaps shoot very quickly, too quickly than they would like to, get everything together. They've got to provide everything on the set. They've got to do everything for themselves to make it run smoothly. And there's a lot of people on a film set who are not exactly easy to deal with, including most directors. So having done that, raised the money, then done all that back-breaking practical work, they then have to try and sell the film and get it put out in a way they'd like it to be put out. And that's very difficult too. So I think the producers probably have the worst job in the film industry, the hardest job.
So there we are. You can look up Derek's web-archived articles for The Guardian in the link below. Please give this vlog a like and a share on your socials, and please subscribe and leave a comment to that effect. And also please buy my book, The Films That Made Me, an edited selection of my essays and reviews for The Guardian. See you next time.